You are sitting in traffic. The car in front of you is not moving. You glance at the road ahead and see nothing. No accident, no construction, no flashing lights. Just cars. Stopped. For no reason. You inch forward. You brake. You inch forward again. The same 3 meters over and over for 20 minutes. And then, without warning, the road opens. You accelerate. You look around for the cause of what just cost you half an hour of your life. There is nothing there. No debris. No stalled vehicle. No explanation. That is not a coincidence. That is physics. Traffic jams that appear from nowhere, the ones with no visible cause, have a name. Transportation engineers call them phantom traffic jams, or sometimes more precisely jamatons. And the reason they exist has almost nothing to do with the number of cars on the road. It has everything to do with the way human beings react to each other. Here is what is actually happening. Imagine a single lane of highway, 50 cars, all moving at roughly the same speed, all roughly the same distance apart. Now one driver, somewhere in the middle of that chain, taps the brakes. Maybe they got distracted. Maybe they misjudged the gap in front of them. Maybe they just felt like something was wrong. The tap is small. A 1-second reduction in speed, almost nothing. But the car behind them sees it and brakes slightly harder. Because humans are cautious. Because we always leave a margin of error. The car behind that one brakes a little harder still. And the car behind that one brakes harder again. By the time that 1-second disturbance has traveled back through 15 or 20 cars, someone is coming to a full stop. The ripple has become a wall. This is what mathematicians call a backward traveling wave. The jam moves in the opposite direction to traffic. The cars move forward. The jam moves backward. And it can sustain itself for hours, long after the car that started it has driven away, oblivious, and arrived home for dinner. In 2008, a researcher named Yuki Tsujiyama at Nagoya University in Japan ran an experiment that made this visible for the first time. He took 22 drivers and asked them to drive in a circle on a closed track at a constant speed with equal spacing between each car. No intersections, no exits. No reason for anyone to slow down. Within minutes, without any instruction or interference, a traffic jam formed. A single car slowed slightly. The wave traveled backward. Cars stopped, waited, moved again. The jam circled the track, detached from any individual driver, like a living thing with its own momentum. Tsujiyama called it a self-sustaining density wave. The rest of the world called it proof that traffic jams can exist without a cause. But that framing is slightly wrong. There is always a cause. The cause is you. Not you specifically, but the aggregate of all of you. The collective behavior of drivers who cannot coordinate, who cannot see far enough ahead, who react instead of anticipate. Think of it like sound. A single musician plays a note slightly off tempo. In a small ensemble, someone adjusts, and the moment passes. In an orchestra of 100 people, the slight delay in adjustment cascades down the row, and by the end, the last violinist is half a beat behind where the piece started. The music recovers, but only after a visible, audible ripple passes through the group. Your car is the violinist, the highway is the orchestra, and the conductor is missing. This is why traffic behaves differently at different densities. Below a certain threshold, transportation engineers call it the critical density, the road operates in what they call free flow. Each car moves independently. Disturbances die out quickly because there is enough space for everyone to absorb a small disruption without it reaching the car behind them. Above that threshold, the road tips into what engineers call synchronized flow or congested flow. Now every disturbance propagates. Every tap of the brakes becomes a message that travels backward down the chain. The road has crossed a kind of phase transition, the same term physicists use when water turns to ice. Same molecules, completely different behavior. Boris Kerner, a German physicist who spent decades studying traffic at the Mercedes-Benz Research Division, identified this phase transition in the 1990s and spent years trying to convince engineers that the standard models of traffic were wrong. The prevailing view was that traffic had two states, free flow and full stop. Kerner argued there was a third, synchronized flow, a dense but still moving state that was far more unstable than anyone had accounted for. His three-phase traffic theory was controversial when he proposed it. It is now the basis of most modern traffic modeling. What Kerner found, and what Tsujiyama's experiment confirmed, is that once a highway reaches synchronized flow, it takes very little to push it into a jam. A merge. A driver who accelerates too slowly after a green light. A truck on an incline. An animal on the shoulder that makes 400 people slow by 5 kilometers per hour for 3 seconds. The system is primed. It is waiting. And here is the part that no one tells you when you are sitting in that stopped car, angry, watching the clock. You are probably making it worse. When you finally start moving again after a stop, you do not immediately return to highway speed. You accelerate slowly, cautiously, because the car behind you is close and the car in front of you just started moving. You leave a gap, because that is what a safe driver does. But that gap is smaller than it should be for the speed you are about to reach. So when the car behind you closes that gap, they brake slightly to match your speed, and the car behind them brakes slightly more. The wave is regenerating itself from the act of recovery. This is called a stop-and-go wave, and in dense traffic it does not die. It feeds on the very impulses, caution, reaction, self-preservation, that make individual drivers safe. The system is not broken. You are all doing everything right. The jam is a property of the group, not of any individual within it. There is a counterintuitive prescription that comes from this understanding, and it is genuinely difficult to follow when you are in the middle of it. If every driver maintained a larger following distance than felt natural, twice what feels comfortable 3 times, the density of the road would stay below the critical threshold. Disturbances would die out before they propagated. Phantom jams could not form. Traffic engineers in some countries have tested this on smart motorways where electronic signs dynamically lower the speed limit before a jam forms. Not because the road is dangerous, but because slowing everyone down by 20 kilometers per hour raises the effective following distance just enough to keep the system in free flow. The cars slow down, the jam never forms, and perversely, everyone arrives faster. William Beatty, an electrical engineer in Seattle, tested a version of this alone. In 2008, during his daily commute on a congested freeway, he began deliberately leaving a large gap in front of him, far larger than any other driver, and refusing to close it as the car ahead of him stopped and started. Cars merged into his gap constantly. He did not chase them down. He maintained the space. And what he observed, in his own small-scale informal experiment, was that the stop-and-go rhythm behind him, the compressed, twitchy braking and accelerating, smoothed out. His car became a kind of buffer, a soft zone in the middle of a hard system. He could not fix the jam. He was one driver. But he could move through it without contributing to it. That is the strange, quiet truth at the center of all of this. Traffic jams are a collective hallucination. They are real. You can sit in them, measure them, photograph them from helicopters, but they are not caused by anything. They are caused by the gap between how humans actually react and how a perfectly coordinated system would need every driver to behave. They are the physical residue of individual decision-making in a system too dense for individual decisions. The next time you are sitting in stopped traffic on an open highway, with nothing ahead of you but empty road and whatever took you there already gone, you are not the victim of bad luck or bad infrastructure. You are inside a wave, a real wave, traveling backward through a sea of cars, sustained by physics and caution and the accumulated flinches of thousands of people who are all, in their own lane, just trying to get home. The road in front of you is already clear. You just have not arrived at it yet.